Hi everyone, I'm majicDave, and I thought it was time to do a recap of developments so far. So this is the first video that I could find of Sapiens, and it was put up on YouTube in December 2014. So it's been in development for over 4 years now. Now I haven't been actually working on it solidly for the past 4 years. I've also been doing updates to blockheads and things. But in the past year, I've been really working full-time on the game, and I've made quite a lot of progress. So back in the early days, there was just a world. I didn't know yet what it was going to be. I didn't know what kind of gameplay I might have. I just had this big world, and I was just working on trying to make it look good. So I had the basics of the terrain subdivision and stuff in pretty early. I had a basic sort of atmosphere and physically based rendering. I had trees, and it was all going swimmingly, but it was just really a bare bones engine, and I hadn't really thought through a lot of what needed to be done to turn it into a game. And I still didn't know what game I wanted it to be. So I spent quite a lot of time doing sketches, taking notes, trying to figure out what this game was going to be. Initially, it was going to be very sci-fi based. I had this idea that it would be like a space trading game, but set on the surface of a planet. And so I had ideas of space elevators that would be trade portals that you would then, trade between. And I think that could have worked, but in the end, I decided to move away from all that sci-fi stuff and make it a primitive game, which was quite a change in direction there. On the more technical side, I was focusing on trying to make the game look better. The atmosphere was one of the first things that I really replaced, and it's been iterated over many, many times since then. I also worked on the PBR rendering, and a lot of what I worked on in these early days is very much still part of the game now. What you're seeing here is when I was testing this PBR rendering, so it's rendering various surfaces and so on. And all of this stuff, although it's been tweaked many times, is basically the same today as it was back then. I then added bullet physics to my game engine. I needed a physics library for a few things. One of them was just to cast rays to the terrain and stuff to see what you're actually looking at. And another was just to have objects bouncing around. So I still have bullet physics as my physics engine. It's worked out really well so far, so I'm pretty happy with how that's all gone. So those big towers in the background are just to test really large objects. I don't think there'll be anything that big in the game, as it turns out. And you can see that there's a sci-fi theme on the FPS counter and the little hexagon crosshairs cursor thing. And that's definitely gone now, and I'm quite glad. So from there, I guess it was a process of slow refinement. I had a basic sort of game engine renderer in place with physics and PBR and everything, but it was a bit ugly and it had problems, and it was so far. I didn't realize at the time how far away it was from being ready to actually ship as a game. But yeah, I had a long way to go. So I worked on lots of optimization, splitting things out into different threads and redesigning the engine. And I worked on the trees, trying to get lots and lots of trees rendering. And some of the stuff that I did in the early days was probably a bit of a waste of time, to be honest, because I was trying to optimize things in a way that just wasn't useful for what I ended up with, I guess. These trees, they don't look great, and they were optimized for how they look. Now I've got trees that have a lot more polygons. I can't do what I was doing here as a way of rendering lots of fast trees. So anyway, it was all good learning experience, and yeah, it had to be done, I guess. Also around this time, I started trying to think about how the UI was going to work, things like how to select a tree, how to select the ground. And yeah, it was difficult to get my head around how this was all going to work, and I had this sort of sci-fi theme, so I had these sort of sparkly particles, none of which is in the game now, but it was all progress to getting to where I am today. So right throughout the process of creating this game, I've spent a lot of time on the water. There's a few reasons for this. I suppose I just enjoy it. It's quite rewarding to work on something that sort of adds so much, I guess, beauty to the game, if you can get it right. But yeah, so this water fairly similar to what I've ended up with, although this has nice refraction and things. Ultimately, I couldn't really do it this way. There were too many artifacts the way that I'd done it here, so I basically just ended up making it look worse and worse and worse over time than this. Like, yeah, this looked pretty good, but then I finally fixed it up quite recently to a standard that's almost as good as this, but is actually practical. I can actually have it in the game, and the waves and stuff are actually working a bit better than they were in what you're seeing here. So from there, I went on and started thinking about biome assignment. I had to figure out how I was going to have deserts and forests and grassy plains and things, and how I was going to assign where they would be. And I thought I'd be a little bit probably too clever about it and actually make an entire climate simulation for the planet. I guess it was still in the stages where I wasn't working on it that much, and it was just sort of a hobby project still at that time. So I thought I could afford to just, enjoy the process of trying to figure out how to make a climate simulation. So that's what I did. A lot of this is actually still in the game. It's been sort of simplified a bit, and there's a lot more sort of random assignment now of biomes. But in general, it still does use this code. So it's nice to have. It's not really necessary. Most players probably will never notice, but it's nice that actually there are deserts where they sort of should be, and so on, and not just sort of randomly assigned. As well as working on all of this, I was also building this whole Lua sort of interface. So I've ended up with probably what's going to happen is the majority of my code is going to be written in Lua, with the rest being C++. And it's just fantastic. It's really, really good. I'm so happy that I've done that, because it's just so much easier to work with Lua. Like, once you sort of get your head around how it all works, it's just so much quicker, so much easier to just make little changes and add sort of new elements. In particular for the user interface, it's just awesome. Like, I'm just all the UI is written in Lua. I've got the C++ sort of backend that just renders the text or whatever. I've got a text view and a color view and an image view. And even things like buttons are pure Lua. So I've got a button Lua class that actually handles all of what a button should be. And so if I want to change that, I can just change a script. I don't have to actually recompile the engine at all. I've actually found that Lua is quite capable of doing even biome assignment and terrain height calculations. I still take some of that out into C++. That it's still calling back into C++, but it's fast enough that every single point of terrain can be passed through Lua, which is awesome. It means that mod creators can actually change how the terrain is generated and have pretty much full control over how the world looks even. So that's great. So now we get to the start of this year, 2018. So this year I've been working full-time on the game, and I've been focused on everything, but actually adding gameplay. So it wasn't, up until this point, it really was just an engine, whereas now there's actually some stuff happening. So what you're seeing here is just when I was trying to get animation working and 3D model import working. I decided to use the GLTF2 file format, which is working okay for me. It's not perfect, but I haven't really had too many problems. I'm basically just using Blender to do all my animations and modeling, and it's fine. I haven't had to really look at that code much since I wrote it, so that's great, because it's not very nice code, but it does the trick. So at this time, I also started working on interactivity with the world and thinking about how resources would be gathered and mined and so on. Initially, I thought that they would all be cubes like this, and yeah, I don't know. I thought that everything could be a cube. I guess it was partly to do with sort of my idea that this would be a low poly world and everything would be very simplistic and represented by simple shapes and things. But ultimately, I realized that was not enough information. You couldn't tell that a white block was wood, basically. It seems obvious in hindsight. But so now they're all using their own models and stuff. But this was the sort of starting point of thinking about how these guys were going to be interacting with their world. From there, it was for a while at least. It was fairly just sort of logical progression. It was adding more content. I was trying to make a new model sort of every evening, or when I finished for the day, I would just quickly make a tree or something. And so I was just adding content, and I was getting the guys to actually start to follow orders, go and chop down trees. I think this is actually where I swapped out the blocks to become branches and things. And the first kind of building mechanic as well, of actually placing a campfire, and that was quite exciting to sort of get. It was starting to feel like it was coming together at this point, and in fact I probably thought I was much closer to the finishing line than I was, but it was a good sort of point in the progress. It's interesting looking back at these videos now because they all look extremely dark in the shadows, and that was something that I had no idea. Basically, my screen was miscalibrated, and all my videos were really dark. So, but I didn't. Yeah, it looked fine to me. But anyway, so I've fixed that now. So a lot of the work that I've done this year, you look at this and I think, wow, I haven't actually come that far, but a lot of it has actually been taking this is a prototype, what you're seeing here, and what I've done is taken it and actually refined it to the extent that now it's almost usable in a final shipping game. Everything's a lot sort of snappier now. My frame rates are much higher. I'm able to render a lot more trees than what you can see here, and it's just it's come a long way. But yeah, you can still see that these guys are carrying things. The animations that I'm using now are still the same as what I was using there. They will all be replaced, probably. Pretty much all of them. But they're good enough placeholders that I'm able to go forward with that. I then went on to try to tweak the look of the man a bit. I didn't really like how he was looking before, but it's interesting looking at it now because this kind of looks worse. So I don't know, I guess I went through some worse patches. But one thing that I was trying to do here was make them all look individually slightly different, and it really failed here. I didn't really pull it off. They all still look basically the same. And what I was doing was I was trying to use Blender's shape keys to allow me to sort of interpolate between various different facial features. And I just found that not really a workable solution, because certainly at the moment with me iterating over the model so much, every time you add or remove a triangle, basically, it just completely breaks all the shape keys and you have to recreate them again. And that's quite a large kind of tedious task. So yeah, it's sort of a bit of an unsolved problem for me still, but I guess probably I'll just make them all look the same for quite some time, and then right near the end of development I'll go in and make shape keys again and actually add some more variety. This was also about the time that I added the eating of apples, and also I think the look of it really sort of started to come together here. It's still got that low poly look that I decided against ultimately, but the atmosphere, the lighting is good, apart from this kind of darkness issue due to my screen. But yeah, it is, the look is really starting to come together. Then I went on to work on the digging and building mechanics. So this was really just focused on the user interface, these animations. In fact, they're still using these same animations. This is supposed to be like for chopping down a tree, instead they're using it to dig. But anyway, then they're not even going to be able to dig in the early stages. They're going to need to create some kind of tool. But I wanted to explore this mechanic and make it work. And I think it was a good time to do this, because it really it revealed a few problems, both in the engine and in the user interface. And I think most of those are now resolved, so that's good. But yeah, I also made a start on the building mechanic, and yeah, a lot of this is sort of fairly similar, but I've made some good improvements since then. But it was good to start thinking about this and get some basic kind of building happening. Now we're about halfway through the year, and I decided to add mammoths. And yeah, mammoths actually haven't been in the game for some time now. I don't know, I broke them at some point, or I just stopped rendering them. And it's unfortunate. I'm really, really looking forward to having animals in the game again, because they just add so much. And just having little chickens running around would just be awesome. So that's probably going to be pretty high on the priority list for next year. So around this time I also added particles, and yeah, everything, like the fire still looks exactly the same as this in the game now, and it's probably not going to stay that way because it doesn't really suit the non-low poly look that I've now got. But yeah, the technical kind of side of it is working pretty well. Then I went in and changed all of the user interface look. I didn't like the black boxes that I had before, and yeah, I just wanted to give it a bit more sort of texture and a bit more personality, I suppose. So yeah, I'm still not actually happy with this look, but it was an improvement and it's a step towards the right thing. I'm probably actually going to give it a go, see if I can make 3D model based UI, so it would actually use the same kind of PBR rendering to actually light the objects and make the buttons and stuff look like they're a bit more kind of real, which I think could be quite cool, but we'll see how that goes next year. And this was also where I decided to add grass, and that's what ultimately led me to get rid of the entire low poly look. And yeah, that was absolutely the right choice. It looks so much better now. There might be some people who disagree still, but I just think that the grass looks good here. It looks even better now, and the trees, like, yeah, the whole look, it was working okay. I could have shipped the game using the low poly look, but I'm just, yeah, so much happier with how it looks now. This was also about the time that I added stockpiles, so thinking about ways of kind of keeping people busy and giving them ways of sort of, grouping resources together. I'm not totally happy with how that is yet, but yeah, it's a good step in the right direction as well. The building mechanic also got a bit of work here. I was trying to figure out how to get buildings to sort of snap together and things, and that's working fairly well too, so yeah. Okay, so now we're up to September of this year, and I have finally decided to call it Sapiens instead of Ambience, and I've also completely replaced the look, got rid of all the low poly stuff. And yeah, as I've said, I love this look. I think it's so much better. It brought with it a few problems, some of which I'm still kind of trying to solve, but overall, it's a huge win. This was when I was also working on user interface quite a bit. I replaced the entire system for interacting with people and objects. I added this skills system, which is still not complete, and it's interesting because when I did this, I knew that this wasn't good. It wasn't great, but it was a step forward because I just needed some way of figuring out what's going to work and what's not. And so I had to do something. So I did this, and I've learned quite a lot just trying to interact with this user interface that I've created. It's very, very clunky. There's too many button clicks to get from I want to build something to actually selecting what you want to build. So yeah, I've got some good ideas for how to improve that now, where I was quite lost before I did that. And now finally we get to my latest video. There's not a huge amount that changed between the previous video and this one, and that's because I went and replaced my entire renderer with Vulkan instead of OpenGL. And that was an interesting choice, I suppose. I go into it in great detail in my last video, but I guess the summary would be that it was the right choice, and the game is so much better as a result. The performance that I'm getting now, like even since that latest video, I'm now rendering just so many trees, and I'm pretty close to having very rock solid 60 frames per second on my GTX 1060. It's not quite there yet, but yeah, even since this video I've got much smoother kind of camera movement and stuff, so yeah. So I hope you've enjoyed this kind of quick summary of 4 years of my life. No, it's been 4 years, but actually there's probably been about 18 months of full-time development so far, and I feel like progress is pretty good. It's just me working on all of this, and I've not made a 3D game engine before, and there's a lot of components that need to be worked on to make it happen. But I'm feeling very, very good about where it's at now. I think it's looking very good, and the engine behind the scenes is pretty solid. Obviously there's still work to do, but it's really starting to come together. So next year's going to be focused on the game itself. It's going to be focused on content, it's going to be focused on user interface, and actually building and creating stuff. And it's feeling so good, and I just can't wait to have actual building mechanics, like actually building houses that they're going to actually live in, and cooking food on campfires and eating and learning new things and evolving and creating tools and I've got so many ideas, and there's so much potential here. And just the idea that in this world you can actually build structures that these people can live in. I just think that that's so compelling. So yeah, I'm looking forward to next year, and I think I've done a lot of the really kind of hard groundwork to make next year probably quite a fun year of development, I think. So anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you want to watch more of these developer blog videos. Sign up to the forums. We've got playsapiens.com forums, and there's a Discord which I'm posting in every day that I'm working, pretty much just talking about what I'm doing, so feel free to join up to that too. And hopefully stick around, and we'll see what happens over the next 12 months, and maybe we'll get an alpha in sort of mid to late 2019. That's the goal. So yeah, until then, we'll catch you next time.